December 3, 1993, Medellin, Colombia. This was not the burial of an ordinary man. Pablo Escobar, once considered the most powerful drug trafficker in modern history, was being laid to rest. To some, he was seen as a criminal responsible for extreme violence and instability. To others, particularly in impoverished communities, he was viewed as a provider and protector. On this day, an estimated 25,000 people gathered for his funeral, forcing Colombian police and military units to maintain order and control the crowds. The scale of the event raised immediate questions about Escobar's influence and legacy. Why would tens of thousands attend the funeral of one of the most wanted criminals in the world? Why did his death trigger such visible emotion across the country? To understand this moment, it is necessary to examine the final days of Pablo Escobar and the impact he had on Colombia. After more than 16 years at the top of the cocaine trade, Escobar was no longer in control. He was being hunted by Colombian security forces supported by U.S. intelligence agencies, while also facing threats from rival criminal organizations. His network had collapsed, and his freedom depended entirely on remaining hidden. Despite extensive manhunts, his location remained unknown for months, creating a major obstacle for authorities. By late 1993, intelligence efforts had shifted focus to Escobar's family. Surveillance and monitoring were intensified, with officials waiting for a single mistake. On December 2, 1993, Escobar contacted his son by telephone. He was aware of the risk, but investigators believe he understood his situation was nearing its end and wanted to make one final call. That communication allowed authorities to trace his location to the Los Olivos neighborhood of Medellin. Shortly after, Colombian special units, supported by U.S. advisors, moved in. During the operation, Escobar and his last remaining bodyguard were killed, following a brief exchange of gunfire. Within hours, radio transmissions confirmed the news. Escobar was dead. Public reaction spread rapidly across Colombia. News outlets repeated the same message continuously: Pablo Escobar had been killed. For some, it marked relief and closure. For others, it represented loss. As people gathered at the site and later at the funeral, the divide in public opinion became visible. To the government, he was a violent criminal. Too many residents of Medellin's poorer neighborhoods. He was remembered as a man who had provided financial support and resources when the state had failed. His funeral became a reflection of that contradiction, marking the end of an era that had shaped Colombia for more than a decade. Some mourners openly grieved the loss of a man they believed had protected them. Others expressed relief, convinced that Escobar's death meant an end to years of violence and fear. The crowd reflected this deep divide. Many attendees wore T-shirts printed with Pablo Escobar's image, while others held signs reading, "Pablo, you will always be with us, and long live Pablo Escobar." The gathering grew so large that reports later stated Escobar's family was unable to exit the vehicle meant to take them to the funeral, forcing them to turn around and miss parts of the ceremony entirely. Escobar's family mourned under intense pressure, surrounded by uncertainty and fear. His death placed them at the center of a global media storm, while also exposing them to potential retaliation from enemies. After Escobar was pronounced dead, his body was transported to a local morgue in Medellin, Colombia. Family members briefly paid their respects before leaving the area, overwhelmed by reporters, cameras, and hostile onlookers pressing in from every direction. The funeral was held at Jardines Montesacro Cemetery in Medellin 2 days later. Thousands arrived to say their final goodbyes, turning the burial into a chaotic scene. Authorities attempted to keep control, but emotions ran high, and the crowd repeatedly pushed forward. Despite efforts to restrict access, mourners surged back toward the gravesite, overwhelming security measures. The burial itself was rushed. A priest attempted to conduct prayers, but the pressure from the crowd made it impossible to complete the service properly. Escobar's family faced multiple challenges at once: fear of retaliation, scrutiny from authorities, and relentless questioning from journalists. One family member later described the day as unbearable, saying reporters had ambushed them at every turn. Escobar's son later stated, "We are just going through a lot and trying to make our lives normal for my mother, my sister Manuela, and me." He described the previous 24 hours as the most intense of their lives, marked by grief, confusion, and exhaustion. Losing the head of their family in such a violent way was devastating, but the chaos of the funeral only deepened the trauma. that day reshaped everything for them. Some lost the head of their family. Some lost a man they believed was their protector. Others believed the country had finally been freed from one of the most notorious criminals the world had ever known, Pablo Escobar. S. death did not bring a single reaction. It exposed deep divisions that still exist within Colombian society today. Public opinion in Colombia remains sharply divided. To some, Escobar is remembered as a Robin Hood-like figure who used his wealth to build homes, fund community projects, and support the poorest neighborhoods when the government failed to act. These supporters argue that his influence filled a void and gave dignity to people who felt abandoned by the state. For them, his legacy is complicated, but not entirely dark. To many others, Escobar represents one of the darkest chapters in Colombia's history. They view him as a violent trafficker responsible for thousands of deaths, political corruption, and years of fear that damaged the nation's reputation worldwide. Some Colombians compare his impact on their country to how Germany views figures associated with its darkest past. Even decades later, they argue that Colombia continues to carry the stigma created during Escobar's reign, from international suspicion to increased scrutiny at airports. The debate remains unresolved. Was Pablo Escobar a symbol of rebellion born from inequality, or a cautionary tale of unchecked power and brutality? His story continues to be studied, argued, and retold. Not because it offers easy answers, but because it reflects the consequences of a nation pushed to its limits. The legend lives on, not as a celebration, but as a reminder of what happens when crime, power, and desperation collide.